thank you so much for your time this evening. And let's take a step back in history, because you have this conversation with the former president, not in isolation. I mean, we've seen what has been happening over time, and you've covered both of them. You've even covered that moment. You know, a lot of people always talk about the Polokwane moment, but what we saw then take place after that is that we saw the former president Thabo Mbeki also deciding not to campaign for the ANC, and some would say that he's, you know, basically his successor is doing the same thing that he was doing. But one would then ask the question, what is different this time around?
I think what's different is that the former president of the ANC has decided to support a political party contesting elections against the ANC publicly. Now, Mbeki at that time, during 2009 campaign of the ANC, what he did, he wrote a letter to the ANC leadership giving reasons why he is not going to campaign for the ANC. In that letter, he didn't say, I am going to campaign for a particular party, even though he didn't agree with what was happening in the ANC. In the same way, the former president of the ANC, Zuma, is saying he doesn't agree with what is happening in the ANC. He took a backseat, and therefore he just became an ordinary member who is not active in the structures of the ANC, but continued to be member of the ANC. So I think that's the difference. The problem is here, you have a person who led this organization now campaigning for another party, and that's where the displeasure is.
And, you know, talking about displeasure, he speaks about some of the issues, and it's not the first time we've heard him talk about the state of the ANC, but it's interesting that now he's saying to them, you are fully aware of what South Africans are grappling with as a party, fully aware of how, you know, South Africans are upset about some of the issues. It's now in your court to be able to tell the voters what you are going to do to deal with some of the issues they've raised.
He is expected to do the same, because in that interview, he is saying he is going to campaign for the ANC. So it will be interesting to hear what will be his message as he assists his organization during the campaign, depending where he will be deployed. Clearly, he's not going to be at the same level like the sitting president of the ANC here and there, like they did with Mandela during Mbeki's tenure. Mandela used to campaign here and there. But if you recall, it was in 2016 where we started seeing him interacting with ANC members during the local government elections at his house with the ANC Gauteng leadership. But it was in 2019, the first campaign by President Ramaphosa for the ANC, where he came clear that he was going to campaign for the ANC, and there was an agreement and a Photoshop and a photo shoot, and also public announcement at Nasrec. And therefore, I think he will also have to explain to the voters, when he wants voters to vote for ANC, what will be the reason. But I think he is trying to say to the ANC, craft your message. Let your message be appealing to the voters, and don't mislead the voters. Accept where you at. And as he pointed out, in his perception, where the ANC veered off the road, start to admit and then move forward.
It'll be interesting to, you know, just follow some of those leaders on the campaign trail and hear how they begin to address some of these real issues by the voters. But before we even get to the issue around the DA and the letter, there's something, you know, that is really, of course, developing as an international news story, and that's the situation in Haiti. A lot of people concerned about what is going on there and what happens now as the UN withdraws, and listening to what he has to say. It's quite an interesting take.
Yes, indeed. He is very familiar with international issues. As you know, that he is very passionate about the African continent and the Africans in the diaspora, and therefore the Caribbeans and Africans around the world. He does follow what is happening. He does interact with leaders in the diaspora who are part of the history of the African continent. And therefore he had a good relationship with the former president of Haiti, Aristide. And therefore he is trying to explain to us that this is where the problem started. When a governing party lose focus in terms of doing the good things, it does lose support with the masses and the populace, and therefore you find opportunists coming up. It might be criminals, it might be certain interest parties, which leads to instability politically and the security. And he is able to narrate that story, what went wrong in terms of the governing party in that country. As we speak, that governing party is paralyzed. And that's what he spoke about yesterday, that you can't have a situation where the state is weak. And the state is a state in the South African context based on a party that has been supported by the voters to be a governing party. And therefore, he was also yesterday talking about strengthening the state. You also have to strengthen whatever party is in power so that the state is strong. Now, in the Haiti situation, the governing party is weak, and it has led to lawlessness. And him saying that he will consider speaking to Aristide to get more information. Now, we will do a follow-up on this one, because in the same way he was able to speak to Macky Sall and to say, no, you can't allow this country to lose its good track record of democracy. Do A, B, C, D in line with the pronouncement of the Constitutional Court. Maybe he will also have to do the same. We'll get maybe him later in the year.
And Sophie, just before I let you go, I mean, there is a humanitarian crisis also that is unfolding in that particular country as well. And there's been quite a lot of concern, even as, you know, the UN is withdrawing. About what happens then to the ordinary Haitians?
You know, when the international community leave the country, it becomes a problem, because now you are leaving these communities on their own. No one is watching. And therefore, it will be a sad day if the entire UN contingent can leave Haiti, because there's no one who's going to speak on behalf of these Haitians who are victims. And therefore, that announcement today that the United Nations will be pulling out its staff, you know, the general staff, you'll still have few people. It is quite worrying. You'd recall a similar situation prevailed in Sudan when countries withdrew their staff in Sudan, and look where Sudan is now, and nobody cares now, because you don't have any representativity in terms of international community, and therefore no one cares, and therefore that will be a very, very sad day. And the question is, that arrangement that Kenya will assist, where is Kenya now?
And Sophie, please stay put. Don't leave just yet. We do want to bring in our correspondent, Triny Mena, for this particular conversation, who is live for us in Caracas. Thank you so much for your time. Let's just talk about this latest development, of course, the withdrawal of, you know, these non-essential staff by the United Nations from Haiti. Firstly, let's just start with how that has been received on the ground.
Uncertainty is the best word to describe the situation right now in Haiti. The streets are relatively quiet, with people trying to stay at home in order to stay safe from the widespread violence. But there are severe shortages of food and medicines. There has been 2 weeks of violence across especially the city, the capital, Port-au-Prince, that we know is controlled by gang groups that are right now calling for a new leadership in the country. As we said, well, the UN has announced that it's retiring oil non-essential personnel. They are trying to send some humanitarian aid from neighboring Dominican Republic, and they say the staff that is in charge of life-saving operations will remain in the country. But right now they are saying non-essential personnel must leave the country. Also, the United States announced yesterday that they will send a fleet of Marines to save or to secure its embassy. The U.S. embassy remains open, although with limited operations.
Mari, you know, some of the people that are watching this particular story unfold, they describe this moment as Haiti being in the throes of an unprecedented crisis. Some are even saying that it's an uprising possibly not seen in decades. Now, if we see what is happening around the embassy, the evacuation now of non-essential staff, does it not leave some of those who are on the ground, the ordinary Haitians as we speak about, you know, vulnerable?
Yeah, well, violence is not a stranger for Haitians who have been dealing with violence for many years. The situation right now is that after several economic crises, political crises, also natural disasters, well, gangs has progressively took control. There are about 200 gang groups in Haiti, half of them in the capital, and they are right now the authority in the country. They are calling all the decisions. For example, they have control of the port, the airport. They have attacked essential locations like the presidential palace and police stations. And the situation is the police and the military forces are outnumbered by these gang members. So they right now have all over the controls, leaving the regular residents, the populations, in a really hard situation. They are forced to flee their homes in order to be safe, or also to even migrate. For many years, many Haitians have migrated mostly to the United States, and the UN said last week that in only a 2 weeks period, about 50,000 Haitians left their homes due to this rising violence.
And Mari, Kenya, of course, at some point we saw the commitments that were made. The president still reiterating his commitment to deploy some of the troops in order to be able to assist in that country. That particular commitment, a lot of people are wondering what's happened to it. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, the United Nations approved a mission coming from Africa, and Africa will be playing an essential role in order to improve the situation in Haiti. The key issue here is that with the new government coming into place, there are doubts that the Kenyan agreement that was signed about 2 weeks ago with the former Prime Minister Ariel Henry could take place soon. Kenya, as I said, agreed to send police forces to improve the situation in the Caribbean nation, but that right now has decided to pause that mission until they know who will be the next government, and basically with which authorities they can talk in order to send that UN-backed mission from Kenya to Haiti.
And of course, just before we wrap it up, Sophie, listening to all of this, you know, you think about what is taking place on the ground. Of course, this is not a country, as Mari is saying, that has, you know, is not immune to what we've seen over time now. And a lot of people worried that if you have these 200 plus gangs, the situation could further worsen than we've seen in decades. This is certainly a worrying situation.
It is, as former President Thabo Mbeki pointed out, that this is the collapse of the political system. And when the political system collapses, you don't have anything to substitute that system with. You end up with these opportunists. And it might be criminals, it might be people with vested interest from business in terms of taking any mineral wealth, if, for example, on the continent, your country has got such. And therefore, this is a setback, and Haiti the Haitians, I think at this moment they are looking at the international community, but there are so many challenges around the world. We are still grappling with Middle East, we are grappling with the conflict in Ukraine, we have a situation in Sudan, and therefore it is a very difficult time. And I think the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, was correct when he said the world is experiencing the instability that it has never experienced before. And unfortunately, he is presiding over the United Nations and he doesn't sleep at night.
And where does one begin to put out all these fires? Let me thank you both for giving us an update. They do appreciate it. That was Triny Mena in Caracas for us, as well as our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, joining us live as we look at this desperate situation that's currently unfolding in Haiti.